What to make, what to make? The Ender Dragon or Toothless? Toothless. Hi, I'm Aluka and I make things with a 3D pen, and this year I decided to get a little better at it. While starting this project, I realized that I burnt up another one of my 3D pens. I don't even remember doing it. To begin Toothless, I started with the frame. When making things with the 3D pen, the frame is the most important part because you build everything on top of it. I went over this frame twice, so when I add the rest of the filament, the frame won't warp and bend. To make this 3D from 2D, all I had to do was take some tweezers and pull the filament up to create the body. It took me 20 minutes to do this side, and then I filled in the other side as well. Before I filled everything in, I took a lighter and heated the filament so I can bend the frame into the pose I wanted it to be in. I knew I was making a base later, so I went for like a Lion King type of vibe. The next step was to fill everything in. This is the most time-consuming task when it comes to 3D pen art. It takes days to fill in something depending on the size. Thinking back on it, I have no clue why I thought I could make this in a week. It took me days to make the head, and you'll see why soon. It took me a month in total to make this, which makes sense when you think about it. I could not make this in a week. I somehow forgot to film myself filling everything in, but I did do it, and I'm sorry about it. The legs turned out absolutely horrible. I felt so defeated, so I took a break from the body to work on the head. So now my new plan is to make the head absolutely perfect so the messed up parts of the body go a little bit unnoticed. And somehow the head ended up being 10 times worse than the body. I have no clue how I do these things. I gave the head a fit test. It looks like a head to me. The next step was smoothing everything out, and to do this I used my Clover Mini iron. This gets really hot and I should be wearing gloves, but I don't because I prefer my hands to signify I have a little bit of talent. Now that the head really looks like a head, the next step is to add the details, and the first thing I added were the eyes, and that didn't look absolutely horrible, so I moved on to these, which I have no clue what these are called. Wait a second. After doing some research, I learned that everyone calls them different things. I picked the best name, which is nubs. I added the nubs on. This is absolutely horrendous. You know when you realize you made a mistake and you try to fix it? Well, I don't do that. I decided that I can fix this beast by just adding more filament on top of it. It didn't work. After finally realizing that I actually need to fix it, I decided to cut the top of the head, but that was harder than it looked, so I ended up just filling this gap in with filament. So I made the head again for the third time, and this go around, I used a soldering iron for the eyes instead of the Clover Mini iron. This already looks better than whatever I had before. For the eyelids, I used a thin piece of filament and wrapped it around. I didn't record it because I'm blind and I had to get really close to see. Toothless's eyes are kind of sunken into his head, so I added more filament around the edges to make this effect. All I had to do was put the head on the body. I decided to make Toothless' lower jaw separate so I could focus on the face. Next up were the wings, and I was really looking forward to making these, 1 because it was going to be fun, and 2 because it was really easy and I love less effort. I started making things with the 3D pen 3 years ago, and if you asked me then if I could make Toothless, I'd say no. I don't feel as though I progressed as much as I could have, and I think it's because I stuck to things I felt comfortable with, which is why I decided to step outside that comfort zone, make mistakes, and learn from them. I have a couple things I wanted to make for a long time, but I was too scared to, and I'm excited to give it a go. One of those things was the Iron Giant. I have been wanting to make that thing for so long, and I'm finally gonna make it this year. After all that work, one wing was done, and I made the other one the exact same way. It also went and added some detail on Toothless. Next up was sanding before I added any more detail to the body or the wings. This just makes everything look a bit better and covers up any imperfections I made along the way. I also sanded the wings a bit less than I sanded the rest of the body just so they had a little bit more texture. And that is smooth. I gave the wings a bend with a lighter and on to the rest of the details. To make the scales, I just put down a small dot of filament and repeatedly burnt my fingers by pressing them down over and over again. Yes, this filament is hot, but I have experienced so much pain already, I hardly feel it. It's kind of like how your mom can put her hand in boiling water and not be fazed. It's a talent some people have and some don't. For the ones at the top of the head, I pinched them. This worked really well and it didn't hurt at all. Once that was done, Toothless was a few steps closer to being done. My confidence was high and I was on to the wing. For the details on the wings, it was as simple as copying a template on paper, sticking it down with a glob of filament. then adding some filament around the line so I had something to work with later when I smoothed it all out. The reason I was going to make Toothless or the Ender Dragon was because they're black and I'm not really good at painting. So I wanted to make something that was hard to make and easy to paint. I can do both, but I prefer to do one at a time. I do have my limits. And if you're wondering how Toothless would be hard to make, I was going to make a realistic version and not the blocky one. Hopefully you can see why I said the wings were going to be easy. I made them quick and it took about less than 2 hours to smooth them out, which is quick when you're talking about a 3D pen. In my opinion, nothing is more satisfying than connecting two 3D pen parts by melting them together. It just looks so satisfying. The claws were next, and I made all of them off camera and put them in this box so I wouldn't lose them, and I lost some. I have no clue where they got up and walked to, and I had to replace them. I wasn't concerned with all the claws being the same length because I knew that I would fix it later. And once I fixed it, I just used a soldering tool to blend all of them together. Then, I used another thin piece of filament to add some skin to the claws. Now, Toothless was completely done, and I think I did a really amazing job considering I made it with a 3D pen. To make the base I mentioned earlier, I recycled the world's best cereal box, covered it in filament, and smoothed it out. I used white primer on Toothless and gray primer on the base. Next up was painting, and Toothless obviously got painted black. The claws got painted antique white, but that was too white, so I ended up going over them with some brown paint and water to dirty them up a bit. The eyes were next, and I hate painting eyes because it's so noticeable when you mess up. I did pretty good here, and Toothless was black, so any mistake was easily covered up. I thought Toothless was a little bit too plain, so I ended up mixing up some gray paint, removing most of it and brushing what was left on of it on him. This technique is called dry brushing and is very useful to learn when painting. And that's about all I know about painting. To make the eyes pop, I borrowed some nail gel from my sister. This will make the eyes shiny and you have to put it under a UV light to cure it. It definitely looks better with it than without it. Then Toothless was completely done and I think I did an amazing job. It turned out great, 10 out of 10. I painted the base the same way and the same time I painted the claws. I just didn't show it until now so the video has a bit of continuity. I tried to dry brush again and who's surprised, it didn't go well. Then I thought I could fix it with the black wash and I'm completely hopeless when it comes to this. My family also hated the base, so I ended up repainting it at 3 AM when I got a random burst of energy. And I didn't record this because it was 3 AM and not because I'm lazy. They all agreed Toothless looks really nice and I agree. That's all for this video. In my next video, I'll be making a monkey with a gun. Bye!